Okay. Good. All right. Teacher. Okay, good. All right, let's get right to where we left off yesterday because there's still a lot to unpack for this one. Okay. So we had gotten up to, and we were starting to talk about, not that either. The reasonable suspicion, probable cause. So the story I told you guys yesterday was regarding what was the one I told you guys yesterday? The weed in the basement, right? That was the teacher, the door was open, reasonable suspicion because there was robberies in the neighborhood. In regards to going in the house and seeing the weed, definitely probable cause to move forward with the arrests and or searching out where they were. So that was probably about, I want to say 2010-ish, right around there, I think. But yeah, it was sadly, that was like the thing of the news. All my students were like, oh my gosh, I had her. I know exactly who that is, because she was a special ed teacher over at Flaggett Middle School. Nice lady, I heard. And then when I read the article more specifically, they said she wasn't necessarily selling or helping with the providing of the marijuana to people, but she had aided in purchasing the equipment, and therefore she was also, I'm not sure if there was any jail time involved with her. I know that the husband was for sure had jail time. But now here's something that came up too in discussion a couple years later, because I brought it up, and then we were talking about ex post facto, which we'll get to later on. If they were to legalize recreational marijuana in Ohio, okay, at some point in the future, and that guy is in jail for growing recreational marijuana, what would have to happen? Yeah, the laws have changed. You are now free to go because it's no longer illegal. There was a couple years back. There was a doctor. Matter of fact, there have been a couple movies made about him. That was in Philadelphia. That was a family doctor, but he was providing abortions. And it wasn't the fact that he was providing abortions. That wasn't the issue. It was what he was doing with the remains of the babies. That he was putting them in cabinets, and the facility was absolutely disgusting. There was all sorts of other stuff. They took him to court. He had done abortions up to the moment of birth. Like it was like extreme stuff. And he's in jail for all that right now. But Pennsylvania has been going through a lot of different adjustments in their laws. If Pennsylvania were to legalize late-term abortions up to and including the day of the abortion, what would happen to that doctor? He would probably be all of his charges regarding the abortions up to and late-term abortions he would be released on. They would probably still fine him for like whatever the health department issues are that he had violated, right? But when the laws change and you're in jail for that law breaking, well, now we have to adjust your jail time. So, second one, this is honestly one of my favorite search and seizure stories. Was Medina. It happened in Medina. There was I believe it was a sheriff, because Officer Schneider had verified that it was a sheriff. Approximately 3 a.m, it was in Spencer, out in that neck of the woods. There was a person driving their vehicle out in kind of like the boonies, not like in the city area, which there really isn't a big city, Spencer, but out in the middle of nowhere. And from far, like way off, he saw the brake lights. So we're talking 1,000, 2,000 yards ahead of him. Just kind of noticed the red brake lights, randomly braking out in the middle of where there's no stop signs. Oh, thank you. Do you want a cake?
Okay.
You sure? I got a whole bunch. I guess I got lunch. Anyways, so he sees the red brake lights kind of braking randomly, but the thing that kind of concerns him is that as he was driving behind this vehicle, again, from the distance, he could tell that it was kind of like little mini swerves. Nothing really major at all, but just enough for him to go, huh, what's going on? And of course, 2 o'clock in the morning, there's really nothing else to do. Let me see what's going on. Reasonable suspicion. Seems a little odd. So let me check this out. So he gets close to the vehicle, and as is normal for a police officer, they just follow you, right? And they make you really, really anxious, sometimes just to see if you do anything. Sometimes I swear they're waiting, like they're trying to make you so nervous you mess up. And you're like, oh man, yeah. Regardless, he's following the guy, and the swerving stops. But it doesn't stop until the cop gets closer. And so he's like, okay. So now his question is, why did it stop? What was he doing that was making him swerve? And now he's going perfectly straight. So, kind of curious. So let me pull this guy over just to start to ask him questions. So he lights it up, pulls the guy over, gets up to the vehicle. In the discussion with the guy in the car, conversation is relatively consistent. One of the things is, as you guys are, has anybody ever, let me rephrase, that was nice. Anybody know anyone, doesn't have to be yourself, who's been pulled over? Okay. When they pull you over, this happened to me a couple times, and it was like a speeding thing, or I went through where I was supposed to brake earlier or stop at a certain point. Anyways, when the police officer came up, where are you heading? What's your name? Where do you live? Where are you coming from? Just random, typically it's routine questions. Does anybody know why they start asking questions? Yeah. Yeah. No, so if you've ever watched a police officer, they typically kind of get close to the window, and the whole time they're there, they're smelling. They try to figure out if there's a smell of alcohol, or if there's a smell of marijuana, or something's just a little off, right? What are some other things they do regarding the questioning? Why do they question you? That's definitely one for sure. What do you guys think would be some other reasons why they ask you questions? Sometimes repeat the same question over and over and over. Well, you almost put your hand up. You what? Go ahead.
So I know this is kind of EMS, but relating it to that, probably their consciousness and their
you could detect impairment. If you've ever talked to a drunk person before, what are you doing? You can catch certain slurs, certain words. What's going on? Is everything all right? If I have a couple of, and I'm going to throw you guys under the bus, if I have a couple of teenagers in the car, what do they typically do with one of the teenagers? Will they ask the questions to both of you at the same time? They may. If they do, they're dumb. And I get one of you guys away. I say, come on back here, have a seat. I'm going to talk to your friend for a minute, right? And then there's economic concept. It's actually a couple different things that go into this, but you have the fear now of what's my friend saying? Because if you're over here sitting down, you're like, oh man, we never had a chance to like figure out what the story is. Now, if there's nothing to hide, no big deal. I'm going to Taco Bell and we're heading home, no big deal. But if you were doing something, what's he saying or what she's saying? What am I going to say? Do I just give it up and go for it? And so all those things got to go in. But if I'm asking questions, I'm looking for consistency. So where are you heading tonight? Where are you going? Where are you going? Going home? Okay. Where do you live? What's your street? Brunswick? Oh, you're from Brunswick. Where in Brunswick? Okay. And then I kind of move on with questions and going from work tonight. Okay, great. Where do you live again? Okay. And so if it's a clear statement, he's telling me the same answers over and over again, or he says, I'm going over to my friend John's house. Oh, John, where does John live? Over on Ridge. Oh, Ridge. Okay. And then I come back to that question and say, where were you heading again? Oh, I was going over to Susie's house. well, you just told me you were going over to John's. Where are we going, right? So they're trying to figure out if the story is consistent. So there's all sorts of stuff. All right, so let me get back to the story. So he's asking these guys questions. There's a guy that's driving the car. And the guy he's not stuttering the questions. Everything seems consistent, but something's a little off. Like the guy is not really answering succinctly. He's kind of thinking about his answers before he's answering them. The other thing that the police officer caught was that he was sweating. He was like legit had perspiration, and it was like a cool night. It wasn't one of those like really hot, sweaty nights. Was avoiding eye contact even when the police officer was trying to ask him questions. No smell of alcohol, no drugs. There was nothing that really made him think he was doing something like that. Has anybody heard the phrase in plain sight? And this is actually a search and seizure situation. If something is in plain sight out in the open, that is instantly, especially if it's illegal, probable cause instantly for me to need to get out of the car. So what the police officer does, and almost all police officers will do this, is as they're walking back to their car to check out your license and some registration stuff, they'll shine their flashlight in the vehicle. Right? And they'll look in. So for this situation, as he went past the back seat, he noticed 2 or 3 big, huge, large, black, hefty bags. Huge ones with the drawstrings on top. And sticking out of one of the bags was a hand. Nothing else, just a hand. And then at that point, he was like, okay, something's a little amiss. I need you to get out of the car. He takes the guy to the car, puts him in the back seat, calls Judge Collier at like 3 a.m. at this point and says, okay, I don't want to mess this up. And I'll write on the board why. Because if I mess this up and all this stuff goes away, I'm really going to be angry. So you want to write this down as well. Fruits of the poisonous tree. Judge Collier comes out to the site of the car, looks in the back seat, sees the hand, and is like, you're good to go. Feel free. Search away. So they proceed to bring the bags out. They find a full human body cut up into pieces in the back seat of the car. And then, remember how I mentioned the swerving and the braking randomly as he was driving in the middle of nowhere in Spencer? What he had been doing was he was grabbing body parts from the back seat and then throwing them out the window. So every time he would throw a body part, it would swerve the car just a little bit, just enough to make the cop go, what's that guy doing? So he had thrown out, I want to say about 20 or 30 pieces of the body. He had killed his wife up in Cleveland and thought, I'll go to Medina. No one lives down there. And dispose of the body randomly along this route. So that's, and I'm not making that up. I've had Snyder confirm it. Officer Covey prior to him confirmed it. That was one of my favorite search and seizure stories. Now, the fruit of the poisonous tree aspect. If I were to collect that information or collect let me rephrase. If I were to search and seize the stuff in the car illegally without reasonable suspicion or probable cause, what would happen to all of the evidence found illegally? What would the judge be able to do with all the evidence? Potentially, I could throw it all away. Now, in this situation, it would have been very difficult to throw that out because the cop would have said, what else would I have needed to do for that to be probable cause? If you have a really good lawyer, you could potentially come up with something, but it was the middle of the night. It wasn't a racial profiling thing. It was a back of the car swerving, reasonable suspicion thing, right? So Fruit of the Poisonous Tree. This is kind of one of those, if you've ever watched any of the crime shows, some of those are pretty accurate. If you ever listen to the very beginning of the Criminal Minds or the Criminal Minds and Law and Order, they'll actually say these are fictional events. Sometimes they'll actually throw it in there based on true events. So if you watch them, you're gonna go, "Oh, that was the court case that happened in New York. I heard about this." But they're gonna fictionize all the names. So let's say that I am police officer walking down the street, and you are literally doing nothing. You're walking down, and I have no information that's come to me about any potential murders in the area. I don't know anything, and I come across you, and you just, I don't know, I just don't like you. I don't know. You just kind of rub me the wrong way. And so I come out, I'm like, all right, get over here. I bring over your car, I'm like, open up your door. And you feel like you're getting kind of forced into it. And I have you open the car and I find a weapon, and the weapon is a murder weapon. For whatever reason, in the fluke of events. Like, what was my reasonable suspicion for pulling him over, or for pulling him over to his car and having him open the. Did I have a valid one? No. So even though I may have found the murder weapon, I had no reasonable suspicion. I had no probable cause. Therefore, everything I get from that point is thrown out. That's what you hear about with fruit of the poisonous tree. And sadly, sometimes, I shouldn't say sadly. Sometimes it sucks as we, as witnesses, or people that are like reading the articles, going, "Oh man, this is clear as day. This is like so obvious." Right? We have to go down that path. Now, this actually is a testament to good cops and bad cops. As Officer Covey, the resource officer we had before Officer Schneider, came up, and one of the questions one of the students had was, "What about the cop who lies or makes up evidence?" And his explanation was, if that cop is found out, made up evidence, created something, what's going to happen the next time that cop tries to do something and is actually trying to do it legitimately? Will the judge trust this police officer anymore? Will the lawyers want to use them anymore? Right? No. So you've essentially ruined your reputation. What are you going to do? Now you're just going to be a beat cop. Won't be able to over tickets. You won't be able to do anything else because you've lost your reputation, right? And you, fruit of the poisonous tree, everything you do is going to be tainted from that one incident. So reputation is a huge thing in regards to making up stuff. All right. So we already talked about probable cause. No warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So this last part is kind of specific. I referred to it yesterday in regards to like searching for things in different locations, right? So if I'm looking for, if the judge says search the house, is that particularly describing the place to be searched? Now, if you ever see an actual warrant, it will say the house, it'll get more specific. So yes, the house, but I also am allowing you to search this, and this. The more generic it is, the more you're going to have a potential for throwing it out. The more specific it is, the easier it's going to be to deal with in courts. Right? So search warrants have to be particular, and then you got to be what am I specifically looking for here? And what are the specifics of this one? Has anybody by any chance ever heard of the court case Mapp v. Ohio? Mapp v. Ohio. It's from Cleveland. Now it's from the 60s. Anybody? All right. So actually, let me jump over to the next slide because it actually has it up there for you. All right. So Mapp v. Ohio is actually the very, very first case dealing with search and seizure. The story is actually that there was a series of bombs that have been planted around Cleveland. There was some feelings it was a terrorist type thing, organization. And so they were searching for this person, came across where they thought he was staying was at, her name was, I know her last name's Matt, but I want to say it's Dolores Matt? I know it's Matt. Anyways, police come to the house. They go up to the door. They say, hey, we think so-and-so is in the house. She's like, you can't come into my home unless you have a search warrant. You don't have enough evidence to come in. So they reluctantly backed off. 2 police officers stayed at the house just in case something happened. And 2 other detectives went to get a warrant. Well, they couldn't get one because the evidence was so vague. The judge was like, "There's no, I'm not giving you one. It's too generic. I need specifics. What are we looking for? Who are we looking for? Help me out here." Nothing. So the police officers came back, the 2 detectives, with a piece of paper that had nothing on it other than like writing of another letter for something else. And they waved it in front of her face and they said, "This is our warrant." And they tried to get past her without giving her an actual warrant, even though they were telling her it was. So she grabs the paper, puts it into her brassiere. They immediately arrest her for assaulting a police officer. When they search the house, they find no bomb-making materials whatsoever. They do, however, find pornography. And in the 60s, pornography was illegal. This is pre-Playboy, or the beginnings of Playboy, before freedom of the press kind of applied to other things. So they arrested her for obstructing the police officer's investigation, for battery of a police officer, and for pornography in the house. Because all of the evidence was seized illegally, everything was thrown out. She was free and clear, and it set a precedent for searching and seizing homes. You have to have specifics. You have to have information. Thank you very much. You want a candy bar?
No, thank you.
That's all right. It's for a good cause. Is this for your program, right? So yeah, searching and seizing a house. Map v. Ohio is kind of like searching and seizing houses. That's the one you typically look at. In plain view, that's the one in plain sight I had mentioned earlier. In plain view, if it's out in the open, well, that was dumb of you. that's probable cause. That's all I need. School parking lot. This came up in one of my 8th grade class. One of my students said, "Well, my dad has medical marijuana, and he smoked it, and he's legit. It's prescription, but I'm driving his car now. What happens if they have a search of their vehicles?" And Officer Schneider told me this. They've trained the dogs differently now. It used to be that they would actually have them. They would jump up on the cars, and they would potentially scratch the car. So lots of the kids were upset. Now, has anybody ever seen the dogs recently? What they've done? Maybe know how they train them now. They train them the exact opposite. So when they come up to a car that has something in it, they sit. They just sit down. So I was watching. There was a drug dog. It was actually. Has anybody seen the show? I can't remember. It's the drug. It's a real life event of border security guards, people coming into the United States through LAX and through the southern border, and they search them. In the TV show, they actually show the dog going by all the bags, and the dog just sits down. That's it. Anyways, out in the parking lot, I had a couple years ago a student. Felt bad for the kid because he's a good kid, but he had gone hunting over the weekend with his dad, crossbow hunting, and he left his crossbow right in the front seat on school property. So we're kind of forced to go one step further. We called him out. We had to explain what the thing was, but it's a 0 tolerance policy. So he was put up for suspension, or suspended for sure because he had it. Put up for potential expulsion. Didn't happen because the school was like, we realized what was going on. These are the steps we have to go through. But it was plain sight. It was sitting right there, right on his front seat. We're like, there was no threatening anyone. It was just there. We had another kid come in, and this is a whole different story. He was getting bullied by a couple of the kids here at school, and he had a shotgun at the house. So when he drove in, he passed the kids that were bullying him. He just lifted the shotgun up out of the window, like past the window, and then brought it back down. He was expelled, right? Because it's a whole different situation. Plus, it was plain sight. When they went to search his car, it was sitting right in his back seat. So plain sight's a big one. If even not on school property, my brother, when he was 19, 18, him and his buddy went out, they were drinking, they put a beer can underneath the back tire and just keep it underneath, just whatever. That's plain sight, it's under the tire. All that is reasonable suspicion. They look in the back seat and there's open containers in the bottom and the back seat well, or the wheel well. So there you go. The next one I want you guys to have. This is the one that there's some blanks on your. There are exceptions. So remember the fruit of the poisonous tree? That's what we call the exclusionary rule. There are ways to get past certain search and seizure situations. They're difficult to fight for, I should say, in court, but they have been used in the past. So let's say that, let's go back to the arrest of Ryan in the middle of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. Had no probable cause. But then I find out that there was an arrest warrant out for him in the state of Illinois, because that was where the murder happened. Right? Had I run the plates of the car he was driving, I would have inevitably found out that there was an arrest warrant for him. And then I potentially, this is again, it's kind of, it runs into like gray area here. I inevitably could have found out that he was potentially running from the law, and searching his car would have been reasonable. And then I would have had probable cause. So that sometimes you'll hear them use the inevitable discovery. I would have found out had I done this, which I was going to do anyways, but I did something else first. The other one, and this is actually one that came into light probably in the last 3 or 4 months. It was one, I think it was in North Carolina where this happened. The knock and announce, which is why lots of departments try to avoid this. Typically, when you deal with that knock and announce, there's like a SWAT situation, or you're gonna go in real quick because you don't want people to throw away evidence. So let's say I'm gonna go in on a house that we know, based on all of our evidence, is a drug house. Right? I don't want them getting rid of the evidence, and I want the element of surprise so that they don't have time to get the weapons or time to destroy evidence. So I will knock and announce. So those are the ones where they go, police, boom, 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 and then they hit and they go in. Okay. Now, typically, you have to get some sort of permission from the courts. You go through certain processes and make sure that you are doing everything you've possibly done, and you have enough evidence to tell a judge, hey, listen, we think that this is a high-risk situation. Right? So those are typically specific situations. Good faith, an officer obtaining legal search warrants is acting in good faith, even if the warrant is later shown to be faulty. I've done my due diligence. I know that this house is where the guy has been potentially trafficking women. Right? I know it. I've done my research. I get a search warrant. I get all the stuff in my power I can get, and I go. I implement the search warrant. I find out that yes, this guy has been trafficking women, trafficking children. I find evidence in this house. The lawyer comes back and says, yeah, but the search warrant didn't say basement. And you searched the basement. Right? So remember, the Fifth Amendment says specific. Oh man, I did everything. Now, what the judge would probably, or the lawyer would probably say in the prosecution, yeah, but in the upper floors, we found evidence that pointed to the basement. So that led us to go search the basement. So you can play around with the good faith. And then honest mistakes. If officers provide with incorrect information, finds evidence while attempting to carry out their duties, the discovery is due to an honest mistake. So let's say that you guys call me as the police officer and you say, hey, listen, I really think that person over there, I don't know, they're like hanging out around that house over there. I don't know what they're doing. You might want to go check it out. Thank you very much. I appreciate the phone call. And I go over to this van that's sitting over there. And I knock on the door. Sir, I've gotten phone calls from a couple people in the neighborhood saying that, you know, you're supposed to be here. What are you doing here? And I notice while I'm there that he's got a weapon in the front seat. Right? I didn't need a search. There was no probable cause for me to go talk to him. There was reasonable suspicion from somebody else, right? So honest mistakes, or I'm patting you down for what I think is going to be drugs, and I find a weapon. Oops. Oh, wow, this weapon was used in a robbery a couple weeks ago. So there are exceptions to the exclusionary warrant. So evidence is admissible in courts in certain situations. Last one regarding search and seizure, and I'm going to go back a slide. I'm not going to play this for you guys, but I want to at least see it on the screen because this is one that has become huge in our day and age. Digital access to your phones. Because in a police officer search your phone. If they did, what would they have to do? Specifically your phones. They'd have to have some sort of evidence to prove that there's something on the phone, reasonable suspicion, probable cause to get to your information. Right? Or, and this is where we start to get into sketchy areas, could I do an end round? Could I go around and figure out another way into your information? Right? What if I have a theory that you have stuff on your Facebook account or on your Twitter account, but it's private? Here comes the question. When you post something on social media, is it still yours? This is no longer yours. Once you put it on Twitter, or once you put it on Facebook, or once you put it on Snapchat, or once you put it on Instagram, or once you put it on TikTok, it is no longer yours. It is Twitter's. It is Facebook's. It is Instagram's. They own it. It's their property now, which is why you have to be very, 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 very careful when you agree to certain things. Yeah.
Then why can't Facebook, Twitter, or Snapchat be held accountable for what you post on?
Thank you very much. Which leads us back to the First Amendment. Does Twitter and Facebook and Instagram have the right to shut us down or shut people down, whether you agree with them or not? If they now own that information, right? It's a catch-22. It's like a weird situation. So when you're looking at the digital world, as a matter of fact, Covey, not Snyder, told me that they found a phone, one of the little flip phones from like the 90s on a perp that was a drug dealer that they arrested. They were able to go back into stuff that he thought he deleted, but because they had his information, I think it was like a 5-year back text messaging. They were able to find and go back and trace who was calling and who the numbers he was attached to, and they were able to get like 5 or 6 people attached to that. But they went to the phone company. They didn't even go through the guy. They went to the phone company and said, "Hey, here's the number. Can you give us access to this information?" And the phone company owns all of his text messages. So yeah, here you go. Here's all the text messages. We don't care. So in the new digital world, be careful what you post out there. Because even Snapchat, I know it's supposed to go away. Snapchat still has everything. It's still there. It's digital. You think they're going to get rid of all that information? They might at some point in time, but so. Anywho, tomorrow we'll get to the Fifth Amendment. We'll start to get into your rights. If you guys ever get in a situation dealing with being arrested or searched and seized, what can you do? What can you not do?